I've been inhabited by another person, and I don't know who that person is.
As an actor, you think of your body as being your instrument.
What's up? We found somebody we'd like to get to run for that selectman seat.
I was losing my balance on stage.
I had a tremor of some kind. It was uncontrollable.
My doctor said you got Parkinson's.
The last 6 months, I've physically deteriorated. It's harder for me to get through the day.
I used to imagine a future, but I just kind of think, let's be where we are today.
You know, it's not fair. I was reading Endgame one night.
Samuel Beckett's Endgame.
I just felt like, this guy is like talking about my life here, about Parkinson's.
This play calls for inventiveness and some kind of alertness.
I can't control my body or my voice.
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Our hearing hasn't failed.
What?
Our hearing!
I mean, you don't know if the right answer is entertainment or pain.
My fear was that I would be a black hole. My energy would suck the play into a nothingness.
You know, the night we perform, I may be completely mushmouth.
Fine. Audiences change the whole equation.
How do you feel?
I don't complain. Two actors with diminishing physical abilities playing two characters with diminishing physical abilities.
I feel a little strange.
Hi, I'm Jim Bernfield, and I'm the director and producer of Me to Play, which is a documentary about two New York actors who put up Samuel Beckett's Endgame. The two actors have Parkinson's disease, a disease that Beckett wrote about because his mother died of it just before he wrote the play Endgame, which is the underlying material for the documentary.
How did this all come about? I mean, how did you, was it you met Dan and Chris beforehand and they were telling you about what they were doing, or did you find out about what they were doing? What was the genesis of you getting involved with all of this?
It's a great question. In fact, it's a long story. Dan and I have known each other for years and years and years. We watched a lot of football together. I met him at a bar in New York City, which is the way you watch football if your team is elsewhere. We're big 49ers fans, and he was sort of the dean of the table there. And I became close with him, and we traded projects and the like over time. He's, as you know, an actor, and I'm in film. And so at one point, deep into one season, he told me, you know, I've got to tell you this, I have Parkinson's. And I looked at him, and he didn't really need to tell me because my father suffered from Parkinson's and passed away a couple years earlier. So I looked at Dan, and I said, like, I certainly understand what that's like. Later, a couple of years passed, and he told me about that he was running lines with a friend of his who also had Parkinson's, a guy who he'd known from, you know, Broadway dressing rooms in years past. And I said, this sounds like an incredible opportunity to follow you doing this. And so he got in touch with Chris, and the two of them continued to do the process of putting up Endgame, and I followed them with the camera.
You know, I'm a sucker for movies about craft. I love movies about watching an artist work and create, and of course, this has an underlying, you know, tone to it in a different feel because of the circumstances involved with both of these gentlemen, and of course, the play itself. But there is a lot of interesting interworkings. You get to see their process a little bit. I'm kind of curious if the craft stuff really sung to you a little bit as well, and that's what you were after initially, or was that something that happened in the edit?
I'm a filmmaker, not a maker of theater. So I had some idea what happens in rehearsal, but I didn't really know exactly that. What it meant was you kick back and, you know, sort of shoot the bull about you know, other shows you've been in and people you know and such like that. So I watched a lot of that while they were doing this, but process is absolutely what a documentary is all about. So watching these people live their lives is process. Watching them put together a play is process, and then watching them as they, you know, both suffer through and then experience opening nights and all the jitters and everything like that is also process. So I definitely went in with an idea, but I can't say that the idea that I came in with is the idea that the movie Me to Play ends up being about. What's great about the editing process is that you get to discover and you get to really realize with fresh eyes and bringing new ideas about what really happened. It's about weaving together a story as opposed to just following it linearly. And this one certainly is kind of like a weave of 3 stories: a love letter to being a New York actor, Samuel Beckett and Endgame, and also these guys in their lives with Parkinson's. So putting that all together was something that was definitely a post-production challenge, but one which I think really paid off by making this braid that we ended up with.
Another thing that's common that I have a lot of conversations with documentary filmmakers about is being the camera eye and being out of the limelight, being removed from the subject matter, being removed from the idea. It's really I had to imagine it must have been super difficult to do it with these 2 guys who are they just radiate off the screen. Plus they have such real intense moments. And I'm wondering for you, I'm curious about, removing yourself from this process and having an honest, true documentary, but still giving the humanity of this.
Yeah, I did not want to be in this piece. As I said, my father died of Parkinson's, which is one thing which made it such a labor of love for me. But I really wanted to let the guys speak. I am not a fan of this sort of like my experience interfacing with these people documentary style. So I really, from the start, wanted to keep myself outside of it. As well, look at this face, I'm much more a behind the camera kind of a guy. So it was a challenge, but we could be a fly on the wall in a way that if I tried to insert myself, we wouldn't be. The only time that it ever came up actually was we're deep in rehearsal at one point, and the director of the theater piece was like, "Hey, Chris, he's trying to play this out. Why don't you just go and sit down next to Dan?" And I had to be like, "No, that's one rule that I do know of this whole thing is that guy cannot sit down." And he sort of looks over and he's like, "Oh, the peanut gallery finally chimes in." And obviously I didn't make it into the movie, but for good reason. But that was the one moment when I just had to speak up. I remember I'm loquacious, as you can tell, by nature. So it's a real process to get in the mindset of like you're the director and watching, as opposed to you are part of the action. Of course, as where you put the camera and how you choose to use it, that is part of the action. So that's the outlet there. There's my voice is what we see.
Did you have a hard time with a lot of these scenes? Like there's especially one toward the end. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but where Dan really gets emotional and gets really deep into, who he is and what he's feeling, which we experienced a lot of that throughout, but this was a real poignant moment. And so I'm kind of curious, did you have trouble cutting a lot of those scenes, or did you feel like you could remove yourself enough to let it be part of the narrative?
Well, I got to tell you, the moment you're talking about, I know exactly what you were saying, that we always knew would be almost the heart of the movie. He's quoting Beckett. It's absolutely, his life is infused with the exact same emotional content that was going on. And as well, that was, if I remember, was the last shot before lunch at one point. And there was a guy literally buzzing the buzzer behind us saying like, I've got these sub-hero sandwiches here to deliver. Why aren't you answering the door? But I wanted to make sure that I could get what Dan was saying, like in full and complete. So there's a lot of attention to that, but and I brought to it my heart about what Dan was going through, my experience about what it meant as someone who'd watched someone suffer with Parkinson's, and also all the technical issues of like, we're getting this right, that buzzer's not intruding, and all that went with it. It was a challenge, obviously, because I loved Dan like a brother, kind of, and I fell in love with Chris doing the process of seeing how they suffer with Parkinson's. But at the same time, I knew that I'm sort of like, if we could get this onto the screen, we'd be showing a lot more people what it means and answering a lot of questions for people, hopefully in audiences all across the country and around the world.
Did Dan and Chris see the movie in its entirety yet, or have they?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely made sure that I showed it to Dan and Chris all through the process, and also their wives, Ruthie, who is the producer of the stage play, and also Mary Beth, who is a really, I think, amazing anchor in the movie as well, just to make sure that there's nothing that really crossed any lines for them, because this is not about humiliation or sort of reality television style. It's about telling the story in a way that, and I think that what people are saying about the movies, that it really sort of respects people with Parkinson's and caregivers, and I think that makes me really happy to hear that.
Something also that documentaries are famous for is gaining the trust of the subject matter, right? And trying to, like you said, not make them a parody of it or offend them or, make something that they wouldn't, want to be seen out there. And so I'm curious, obviously you had a lot of Dan's trust going in because you guys were friends and all that. But did Chris have any trepidations? When do you feel like you were in it fully with him and that he gained trust with you?
Right. I would say that because Dan and I were friends, he may have had a harder time trusting me, in fact. But with that in mind, he absolutely did. What's interesting, I think, about these two guys is that Dan, for better or for worse, wears his heart on his sleeve about this. Yeah. Chris is very, very shaded. There's always a joke that he can throw in to kind of cover how he really feels. And that's really two different ways of handling some really life-changing news or life-changing ways of being. So you really get his persona very clearly. I will say that Chris absolutely broke down with us and broke it down to his real feelings over time. But yeah, I came to Chris not knowing him as well as I knew Dan by any means. And so it was a challenge. One thing that's been interesting over time in the sort of the COVID era, I still continue to shoot things. And that moment off camera when you're talking with someone and connecting and discussing how things are or just making connection, you don't get that at this time. So that's something that I really spend a lot of time doing with these people because the only way to go deep is to have that trust.
Were the people around them that you interviewed, like the wives and the director of the play and Diane Wiest makes an appearance in the film as well? Did they have any trepidation? Did you have to convince them at all, or was Dan and Chris a good conduit for that?
That's a great question. Diane, we actually have a whole interview with that we didn't use at all. It just didn't sort of fit in the piece. And there are a lot of people. The person who did the design of the play, the lighting,
right.
the lighting, who's a famous Broadway lighting professional.
And the other two actors that are in the movie.
The two actors who we also interviewed as well as Dan's kids and the kids of Chris as well. We decided to make it as tight and small a group as possible to make the story as clear as possible. But did they have trouble deciding to do it with us? Not really. I think that they knew this was something that was important to Dan and Chris. They have, it turns out, incredible reputations in the New York theater community. I know Dan is just this guy who loved the 49ers like I did, but it turns out he's also this guy who has been beaten up by Jean-Claude Van Damme and beaten up Woody Allen. So, he's covered his bases there, and Chris as well. These guys have incredible resumes, and so they can call in favors. And it's not a favor when it's your friends. It's right. It's like, you have Parkinson's, you're going through this thing. I love you. I'm happy to do it. And I think that's what this movie rides on, is that the love that people feel for Dan and Chris.
And the other thing that it rides on is Beckett's words. There's a lot of great moments where you use Beckett's words internally and externally to convey moments and changes and switchovers. And I know that the Beckett Family Trust gave you guys permission to use that information.
Yeah, I don't think I'm telling any tales when I say that the Beckett estate is very, very, very serious about protecting Beckett working rights. And so I think that any time that you do any Beckett work, you have to get some kind of permission from the Beckett estate. You have to promise not to change things, do Waiting for Godot in an elevator or something like that, or make the character in Malloy into a cat or something like that. We promise to do it scrupulously according to the text. And the other side of it is that the director, Joe Grafasi, and the producer of the theater piece, Ruth Kreshka, are real Beckett veterans. They've had a long-standing relationship doing this stuff. So with their reputations, we could go to the Beckett estate and say, can we please do this? And they said, we trust you. We have faith in the work that you've done before. And we're happy for you to do this with us. Joe, in fact, played Clove in the original American production.
Wow.
Which is amazing. He actually said that he was young when he was playing this role, and he's shuffling, as you know. He actually tied a weight to his neck to have the feeling of that heaviness that one would need with Clove. And he said one thing which is fascinating, that Chris, by bringing his Parkinson's to the role, didn't need any additional things. He could bring his own life experience to bring to bear to make Clove exactly the sort of shuffling character that he is.
You also inadvertently talk a little bit about the New York theater scene. its underbelly a little bit, and how important that is to not only the city but to these two guys. I mean, these two guys wouldn't have it without. And I'm curious if you really wanted to highlight that, or was that just something that happened within the narrative?
This is kind of like a weave of, three things: these guys' lives, the lifestyle of being a New York actor, and Parkinson and Beckett. And we definitely want this love letter to being a theater artist in New York City is definitely part of this. One of the guys lives uptown, in a rambling first floor apartment. Dan lives downtown, in Alphabet City in a one bedroom that he shared with his wife and two kids. They live these peripatetic actors' lifestyles. It means they know it's this great subculture that they're absolutely entwined in. But it also means that we get a sneak peek into that, which I love. I mean, that love letter to being an actor in New York is something that I think is a highlight of this movie. It's not an accident exactly, but I didn't know how deep we'd get in it, and we get in pretty deep.
What do you love about being an indie filmmaker?
Well, I love the challenge. I love that, it's there's always another mountain to climb, and the mountains make it bigger or smaller. But each one uses the skills and challenges that you accrued in the last one to really make the next one better, and the next one better, and the next one better. It's a lifestyle choice, as it were, as opposed to a career, as you well know from your background, all the people you talked to, and all the work you've done. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's also incredibly fun and enriching. You're not answering to anybody, and except for yourself, and hopefully your audience, and that's terrific.
We had shared a dressing room. I saw him in his underwear.
So how did I look in my underwear in those
No
days?
worse than usual.
No worse than usual.